cider vinegar. Some vitamins for the chickens. Goes in their water. Hey guys, welcome back to Ashley's Homestead Adventures. And I'm working on seed organizing and getting ready to plant my garden for the 2022 season. So basically I'm just going through all of my seeds and checking and seeing what I have, what I don't have, and reorganizing into these photo boxes. I got this photo case from Hobby Lobby, and it it's designed to hold photos. It's $14.99 at Hobby Lobby. And it has 16 storage boxes in it, and the storage boxes, when you open it up, look like this. And I have my seeds organized in here. So I'm also going through and looking at some things that I'm going to experiment with winter sowing. And we are planning a trip to our Arkansas farm, and I'm going to do some experimenting on just planting some cold weather crops there and seeing what will grow and what won't. I have a lot of extra seeds and duplicates and things like that. But I thought today that I would talk to you a little bit about planting your garden while I work on organizing some of these seeds. So some of the things that I am planning on planting for my Arkansas garden, or at least just trying here in the real near future, are I have red boar kale here from Territorial Seed. Okay. I have asparagus, and this is Mary Washington asparagus. These seeds are pretty old. I shouldn't say pretty old. They're like 3 or 4 years old. That's not really old for seeds. But I have had great germination with these in the past, and I don't have a ton of them left. I probably only have 20 left. But I'm going to give those a whirl. Now is the time to be starting onion seeds. And a lot of, like these onions, for instance, I should be starting them inside. The catch is that we aren't there all the time, and I don't want to start them here in Oregon and then transport everything to Arkansas. So I'm just going to try direct sowing, cold sowing, and see if I can get them to sprout and live. This is all a total experiment, so please don't do this just because I say I'm doing it if you don't have extra seeds that you're willing to experiment with. This is just something that I'm going to try and then let you guys know how they do in the future. So this is Walla Walla onion seeds. I have red grano onion seeds, warrior bunching. These are American flag leeks. Cabbage, ruby ball cabbage. Now I'm really worried about cabbage because cabbage, you guys deal with a lot of bugs in the south that I'm not used to, and cabbage can be hard to start there. So my hope is that if I start cabbage really early, and if it works, I'm not even convinced that they'll work and that they won't freeze and die. But if it works, my hope is that I catch it before all of the caterpillars and everything come out. So I'm also going to winter sow some phlox. This is a Twinkle Dwarf mix. They're annual. Deeply fringed petal margins and diverse streaks, stripes, and zoning makes twinkles really shine. Compact plants rarely exceed 9 inches. So I'll plant this probably in some pots, maybe some borders. Poppies. Poppies really love to be winter sown. I've even heard of some people sprinkling them above the snow, and then when the snow melts, then they germinate when spring comes. And the big thing about poppies is that poppies need a time to be cold. They need like a month of being cold before they'll actually germinate. So I have actually tried poppies in the past to start them early, and I've started them inside under grow lights, and they just wouldn't even germinate. It's just too warm. They need to have a time of being frozen before they will actually germinate. So I'm going to try that. And balsam. So those are my list of some of the things that I'm going to start. I'll probably be starting some beets and maybe some rutabagas, radishes. I'm just kind of picking out some extra things that I can take with me, and yeah, while I'm at it. So, on with planting our gardens. I'm a big planner. I like to plan my gardens out, but rarely do my gardens go in as I plan. So I'm going to try to be a little better about that. But right now we're just planning raised beds, where we're going to put raised beds, where things are going to be going. We have, for what seems to us to be a massive amount of space compared to what we have now. So we're just planning on how we're going to divide the property up into animal and orchard, and where we're going to put our raised beds, where we're going to do the tilled beds, where I want to do many different kinds of beds. I have done tilled garden. I have done no-till lasagna style. I've done back to Eden style. We really love working in just raised beds. We don't till our raised beds. I just add layers of mulch usually in the summer or the spring after I plant. And I add mulch usually in the spring or summer after I plant. And then in the winter or early spring before I plant anything, I add compost. And that's how I refill my raised beds up. And my raised beds go down 2 to 4, sometimes even 6 if they're newer. They'll go down 6 inches in a season, and so that gives me plenty of space to top it off with good compost, or if it's just whatever you want to use. Some people like to use just topsoil because they know they have good compost down below. I like to use compost from the farm. And then a lot of times we will, if we're planting seeds, we'll actually just go to the store and buy the good fluffy topsoil, just because it's not clumpy. I know that I can get my seeds down as far as they're supposed to go, and that the water is going to soak in evenly and nicely, and I don't have to worry about the clumps that some compost have, or worry about it getting, too dry. So in planting your gardens, just some of the things that I do is I sit down with a piece of paper and I map out my property and map out what new garden spaces I want to put in, or in my existing gardens I try to think about what I want to grow in spring, in summer, and in fall. Now for us here in Central Oregon, we pretty much just have one season. I mean, if you're going to plant radishes, it's 28 days. So you can do like a spring crop of, say, radishes and lettuce, and then rip them out and, put a different crop in. But for the most part, what I put in the spring stays. My kale stays all summer long. We don't get to grow, I have not successfully grown tomatoes or peppers, so I don't really have to worry about that. If you want to get a good head of cabbage, you've got to start it early and take it all the way through to the fall. Corn, usually you want to plant that after your cold crops come out in the spring. The thing that I love is that I can plant radishes or lettuce or kale in the early spring before I can plant some of the more tender stuff. And then I can rip them out, top dress my beds, and go ahead and put in, corn or onions or, things like that. So try to draw out try to give yourself a good sketch of what you want to do. Try to figure out where you're going to get your soil. That's one thing that I'm doing a lot of right now, is researching where to get good compost. And am I going to do it dump truck, or am I going to try to maybe buy it by the pallet and bagged soil? Try to figure out about how much dirt you think you're going to need and how much money you want to spend for what kind of compost that you're getting. So I prefer to use my own homegrown compost, but I don't have that option there. So there are a lot of places that you can go and get compost, and for not very much money. There are some places where you can go and, like, the local, like the county will provide it. Like at the landfill, they'll have a place to where they turn yard debris into mulch or compost. And a lot of times that's a great option because it's affordable. I would just recommend that you go and look at it before you commit yourself, because sometimes those things come with sticks in them, or maybe there's some garbage in them because they're sweeping leaves off the street, or maybe you don't know where they come from, I guess is what I'm saying, and you want to make sure that you're okay with what's in them going in your garden. And I'm not going to get into what you should or shouldn't do. I feel that's like a decision that we all should make personally. So there are those options out there. A lot of times your local extension office or your agricultural office will be able to provide you with ideas of where you can get compost for free or very inexpensive. And then you also can, or you can also go to nurseries or things like that and look into buying what some of the master gardeners are using around the area and see if it's affordable for you. We all have different affordabilities, and we all have different accessibilities as far as what we can do, what we can afford, how we can haul it. For some people, I know that maybe all you need is just a bag. You don't need a whole truckload. So just do your research and do what's best for you, and be confident that that is what is best for you. That's perfect. Research your compost. And then another thing is really research mulch. Once you get your garden all prepped and ready and you get your seeds in, and sometimes even before you get your seeds in, if you're going to get your garden ready and there's going to be a long period of time before you can plant, you're going to want to mulch it. The garden likes to be covered, and you want to make sure that you're mulching so that all of the weeds and stuff are suppressed. So I do highly recommend using a mulch. Many people use many different things. Some of the things that I have used are hay, straw, wood chips, and I'll give you my experience on each of those. I do not like using hay. The reason for that is because of the grass seed that comes in hay, and you end up getting Timothy and orchard grass or alfalfa or any number of grasses growing in your garden, and it's a pain in the butt to weed them. I have not had a ton of luck with straw. If you're not really careful about fluffing your straw, it tends to stick together and mold. Obviously, you don't want a lot of mold around the stems of your plants, like your tomatoes and your peppers. And you don't want mold spreading to your plants. You don't want it to create such a damp place that it is causing your plants to mold. But I find that it's hard to fluff straw well enough to where I don't get like clumps of it in my garden. And I just don't like the way that it smells when it breaks down. That's a personal preference. One of the other things that we really struggle with here is getting straw that is organic and isn't sprayed with anything, and I do not like any chemicals in my garden if I can help it. So I don't like paying the amount of money that I have to pay for organic straw if I can find it, and I don't like the way that straw smells when it breaks down. But a lot of people love straw. So I'm not telling you not to use it at all. I'm just saying that's my personal experience. What I do love is I do love wood chips. I do love the wood chips because you can brush them away. You can put them back over after you planted your seeds. I have not had any experience with seeds having any trouble coming up through them. I just make sure in the area, if I'm planting a seed, I go ahead and clear back the mulch, plant the seed, allow it to sprout, and once it's an inch or two tall, then I just bring the mulch back around the plant. So it takes a little bit of extra work when you're mulching and then planting seeds, but I usually try to plant all my seeds, let them all come up, and then mulch. But if for whatever reason your garden is going to be naked for any period of time, it's worth taking the extra effort to go ahead and mulch it and then seed it, pull it back, seed it, and then cover it back up. So whatever you choose to do, I do highly recommend mulch, and it's a good idea to find out where you can get that mulch. There is an online website called Chip Drop that you can get wood chips for free delivered to your house. It is an excellent source of wood chips. Other people have used pine shavings that are bagged. I've not tried that, but from having a barn and knowing what pine shavings do when they get wet, I know they have a tendency to pack, and so I've never tried them in my garden because I didn't think that they would work. I've heard of some people using sawdust. I've never tried that. Some people use pine needles, and that works great for them too. It's a natural resource here in Central Oregon. You can get them out of your own yard and put them in your garden. And truthfully, I have done that for wintertime put her to bed. I have covered up some of my bulbs in my beds and stuff like that with excess pine needles that I've had laying around the property, knowing that I would clean them out in the spring and make a prettier bed. My thing is we have pine needles everywhere, and here, if you have pine needles everywhere, it feels untidy. So for me, putting pine needles as a mulch or a top dress on my beds just makes me feel like I'm dirtying up my garden beds instead of trying to make them look better. So that's an aesthetic reason. So that's why I do that. But it's a good idea to know where you're getting your resources from. Also, planning in garden planning, it's good to get your seeds ready. It's good to get an idea of how long it takes something to grow, and whether or not you have enough time to grow it. It's really important to look up your last frost date, and you can just Google this. Just look up your last frost date, and then look up your first frost date in the fall. And then what you can do is you can just go to Mr. Google Pants and you can ask him how many days in between such and such a date in the spring and such a date in the fall, and he will tell you how many days, and that will give you your growing season. For some of you, you can just Google, what's my growing season? You live in a big enough town that if you ask what the growing season is in your town, Google will know. For those of you who don't, like me, I had to figure out what my last frost date was and what my first frost date was, and here in Central Oregon, we really don't know because we could freeze at any time during the year. So I will use my Arkansas area for an example. Our last frost date is in between April 15th and April 30th, and our first frost date in the fall is in between October 31st and like November 12th or something. So I just looked up how many days in between April 15th to November 1st, and that gave me how many days I have to grow. So you need to know that you have enough time to grow the things that you do. For some people, and for like me, say potatoes, I can do 2 crops of potatoes a year in Arkansas. Then there's other things as far as lettuce. I could do 17 crops or whatever amount of crops of lettuce in Arkansas, but The problem is that it gets too hot. So just think about your cold crops, your brassicas, and your lettuces, your cabbages, your cauliflower, your broccoli, kale, things that are going to bolt. If it gets too hot where you are, then they're going to bolt and go to seed, and you're not going to be able to get any crop out of them because you planted them too late. So you want to make sure that you utilize that time in the spring, plant your cold crops, and then you'll have to rip them out because they'll bolt unless you're trying to save seeds, and then let them go to seed and save your seeds. And then you can rip them out and plant your summer crops. So know what your growing season looks like, and kind of have an idea of what your temperatures are going to look like through the year, and just think about that. If you think, gosh, it's really hot here in July and August, then planting your lettuce in July or August probably isn't a good idea. You're probably they're just going to come up and go to seed. If you want to, I guess what I'm saying is you can plan on doing your cold crops in the spring and the fall, and then doing your summertime crops while your weather is hot. The other thing that you want to consider is when you're looking at seeds and you're looking at buying plants and seeds, is check whether or not they bolt easily, or whether or not they go surrender to blight easily. If you're in a very humid place, you want to try to get varieties that are more tolerant to the things that your climate is going to give you. So if you, for instance, in tomatoes, if you can find a tomato that's resistant to blight, if you live in a really hot, humid place, then like Arkansas, then that's a good tomato. If you can find carrots that germinate in a cooler temperature rather than having to be the 72 degrees or whatever to germinate, and you live in an area that doesn't get really warm until July like I do, it's nice to have those carrots that will germinate at a little cooler ground temperature. So just kind of be aware when you're buying things that there are different varieties for different areas, and maybe looking into that would benefit you. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you guys about as far as planning your garden, for some of you this may be your first garden, and a lot of times people will ask me, well, what should I grow? And to answer that question, it's what do you like to eat? If you like to eat a lot of greens, then grow a lot of greens. If you love tomatoes, then grow a lot of tomatoes. Grow what you like to eat, because gardening is hard, and it's wonderful, and it's rewarding. But if you're not growing something that you want to eat, then when times get tough and the weeds get crazy, you're not going to want to go out there and weed the garden. It becomes too much work for food that you're not going to eat. So my recommendation is plant a big portion of your garden with things that you are going to want to eat, and then save a little spot for something new. There's different ways to eat a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different reasons to grow a lot of different things. We grow everything in our garden, mainly because we just want to grow whatever we can in the short season that we have here in Central Oregon, Zone 3. And what we don't eat, the animals do. I enjoy feeding my rabbits, fresh greens from the garden. I enjoy feeding my horses fresh carrots from the garden. So nothing goes to waste here, and my husband and I both eat just about every vegetable out there. So we do grow, for instance, I grow a ton of extra radishes because my rabbits love radish greens, and radishes, it's a small, a small crop. So I plant a lot of them because I can sit down and eat an entire, seed packet of radishes in the matter of a week. So I just kind of keep succession sowing them throughout the year. I save a lot of space in my garden for carrots because I love to feed my horses carrots fresh out of the garden, and that makes me feel good as a mommy. So I grow a lot of extra carrots, and sometimes they get away from me and they get huge, and that's okay. That doesn't bother them too bad. The pigs love them when they get that big. So grow something that you know you're going to enjoy, and that will keep you coming back and enjoying your harvest and enjoying the work that you're putting into it for food that goes on your table. I am also a huge believer of growing something beautiful. I love to mix my flowers into my garden, and I love to create a space that is not only successful and abundant with food, but it is also beautiful and somewhere that I want to go and drink a cup of coffee or enjoy a cold beer or whatever that may be in the middle of the summer. I want to be able to have a garden that I want to hang out in and look at what I've done. And so I take great pride in my flowers as well as my food. So mainly just grow whatever the heck you want. There's always room to try something. There's always room to try something new. There's always room to try something that you're not sure if it's going to grow or it probably won't grow. I do a lot of that. Here in Zone 3, we don't have much time, so I plant a lot of things that never make it to fruition. I plant tomatoes every year, and I get some green tomatoes. I've gotten 1 or 2 red tomatoes. This last year we planted like 250 cucumber plants, and we were really strong, and they did really good, and we got 3 cucumbers off of them before they froze, and they all died. But we wanted to try to pickle our own cucumbers, so what the heck, we tried it. And the pigs really enjoyed the leftover vines, and we enjoyed the 3 cucumbers that we got off of our plants. So, grow what you want to grow. Grow something that makes you happy. Plant the flowers. Plant all the radishes that you could possibly want. And just enjoy your garden. One of the other things that I think is really important to consider when you are starting a garden, and this is the time of year that is so hard for so many of us, and a question that gets asked a lot, well, when do I start my seeds? And that's, again, why it's very important to look up when your last frost date is, because a lot of seed packets will tell you to plant 4, 6, 8 weeks before your last frost date inside. They want you to start them inside. And if you have the ability to do that, then that's wonderful. You want to make sure that you have grow lights. For some plants, like tomatoes, peppers, you're going to want a heat mat or a room that you can temperature control to be warm. But this time of year, so many people jump the gun and they plant their seeds too early. And what happens is if you have a 24 count tray that you plant 24 seeds in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, those seeds are going to be grown out of those little pots, and they're going to need to be potted up. And then you have something that's taking up twice as much room, and before you know it, your house is being taken over by your seedlings while you're waiting to put them in your garden because it's still frosting outside. So make sure you know your last frost date, and make sure that you hold off and wait and plant those seeds 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date, so that you're not getting yourself overrun with plants that are running out of room, nutrients, and things like that. Some of the common signs in a plant that is unhappy, if it's been in a pot for too long and is ready to get planted out or planted up, would be your plants being purple, or your plants getting like they're losing pigment, like they're getting light green spots on them, or looking like they're burned around the edges. There's a lot of things your plants can get. They can get too big and they can outgrow the nutrients in their pot, and they either need to be fed very regularly in order to keep growing, or they die of lack of nutrients. Or you create a plant that is, kind of sick and puny and doesn't have a good immune system and isn't going to do well when you do plant it out. So it's important to hold off and wait and plant those seeds, 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever your seed packet recommends, before your last frost date, not 12 or 13. So I know that it's hard. We all want to plant our seeds early and now, but you don't want to be overrun or have seedlings that are sick. So another thing that you can be looking into, researching, buying, purchasing, would be your pests and diseases. So you want to do your research on what pests you're dealing with in your area for the plants that you have decided that you love to eat and want to plant. You would like to know what pests and what diseases are going to bother those plants and try to take away your harvest, and how to prevent and or kill them. And for instance, if it's bugs, you might look into getting row covers or netting that can protect your crops from the bugs. If you're dealing with aphids, you may look into where you can get ladybugs. Ladybugs are a natural predator of aphids. You can look into, whether it's neem oil, or if you're going to use like soapy water, works good for like aphids. There's some people use essential oils for their plants if you want to go the organic route, or if you don't, then what pesticides work for what bugs you're dealing with in your area. Also diseases, as far as rust, blight, powdery mildew, the things that you can use on those diseases that work. Whether it be organic or whether it be chemical, however way you want to go, and what plants are affected by those things. It's always good to know your bugs and your diseases, so that it's something that we can't ever do too much research on, because I feel like it just prepares us for when we're out in the garden and we see something. We have an idea of what direction to go as far as looking at how to get rid of it. And also as far as giving your plants a better chance, look into the care of the plants that you're planning on planting. If you're a first-time gardener, you probably don't want to go and plant 150 tomatoes in a hot, humid climate where they need to be pruned in order to keep them disease-free for as long as possible. So you want to look into the work that it's going to take to keep your plants happy and healthy for as long as you can. So whether it be pruning, or whether it be, trimming off the bottom leaves, keeping those plants away from coming in contact with the ground, how you are going to water your plants is another very important thing to research, whether you're going to use drip irrigation or you're going to use an overhead, big, huge sprinkler. All these things you need to consider because your plants are going to want to be fed, they're going to want to be watered, they're going to want to be loved, and they're going to want the doctor to come to their rescue if they get sick. And it's always good to know as much as we can about the plants that we are growing before we plant them. So research, research, research. That's what the cold and the quiet winter is for us to fill our brains with videos and documentaries and books and just soaking up all the knowledge and information that we can and continuing to make ourselves and grow into better gardeners. So I think that is probably it for tonight for me. I'm going to hopefully finish this project and see you guys on the next video, and be sure that you continue to keep growing for our gardens, growing for ourselves and our families and whatever it is that is important to you. I wish you all of the best. Take care. Yours truly.